What does your company do?
I work for a company called Hillbreak, and we offer environmental sustainability services to a range of different organisations.
What are the main reasons why a company would use your services?
There are two principal reasons, or drivers as we call them, which would encourage a different organisation to come to us for different types of services. The first one relates to the law, to regulations which come as a result of legislation. There is a lot of environmental legislation and thus regulation in the European Union, although all member states have their different ways of implementing the regulations. Different businesses, whether they are private sector businesses or public sector organisations, and we work for both of those different categories, will come to us because they know that they have to comply with certain types of regulation, or that they have a suspicion that there may be environmental regulations that they should be complying with that they don't know about.
What's the other reason why a business uses your service?
The second type of driver that leads organisations to come to us for services relates very much to market drivers. So putting the regulations to one side, an organisation, a business or a city council, for example, might come to us and say, what can we do, what should we be doing in order to improve what we have to offer to the marketplace? So, for example, a building owner would come to us and say, we know we have to comply with the regulations, but what else can we do to make our building have more appeal to the marketplace so that tenants may come to our office building, for example, because they know that they want to occupy premises which have what you might call green appeal or good environmental practice.
What's an example of a building with green appeal?
You can think of many examples where this is the case. For example, take an iconic building in central London like the Shard. There is a building which, when it was constructed, would have had to comply with a lot of environmental regulations called building regulations and building codes. It would also, because the owners wanted to make sure that the building had as wide appeal as possible to potential occupiers, they wanted to go above and beyond that environmental regulation to make sure that they had green certificates which demonstrated that the building was environmentally responsible in the way that it was built.
What is an example of a business which has benefited from your consultancy's help?
There are lots of those, but one which I think might be particularly useful to think about is in the context of retail stores. So we have a client who is a global retailer of sportswear who came to us and said, we want to have a program of refurbishing all of our stores to give them a fresh appeal to the marketplace. We want, and we know we will have to comply with environmental regulations, building regulations, to ensure that the materials that we use are appropriate. But we want to go further than that to make sure that the way that we refurbish these buildings is environmentally responsible. So it was our job to help advise them about the sorts of materials and sorts of systems like heating and cooling that they might use in their stores were as environmentally responsible as possible. We worked on a number of case study or pilots buildings in the UK and other parts of Western Europe to make sure that the building system that we were designing worked in a number of different jurisdictions. We then had some pilots in pilot case studies in North and South America and one in China to make sure it worked again in those different jurisdictions. And now that retailer is able to roll out that system of improving the environmental performance of its buildings when it's refurbishing its stores right across the globe.
Why are urban development projects important for cities?
We work with a lot of organisations at the city council level, both in the UK and in other jurisdictions. City councils have come to realise that the way that they plan their cities, the way that they design urban environments is really important in terms of being able to provide a brand for their city. And you can find some really good examples of this. If you take New York City, for example, and you think about some of the fantastic projects in terms of urban design that have been developed there, you can think of the High Line, for example, which is a fantastic project. And lots of other cities look to those sorts of examples and think, how can we, in our local cultural context, how can we ensure that we improve the urban design of our particular urban spaces and bring those together to provide something which helps to develop the brand of particular cities. So we've come to work with lots of different city councils around the world to help them to identify what brand they're hoping to achieve and how urban design can really help them to ensure that that brand is propagated into the marketplace.